Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Adam Murphy of Franklin is a Democratic candidate in the 28th Senate District. The election is November 3rd. Adam, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Steve, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm curious, what do you consider the top one or maybe two issues in your campaign?
I'm a little unusual as far as most candidates in that I'm not strongly aligned one way or the other. But for me, gerrymandering, certainly one of the biggest issues. It's why I got into this race. My Senate district is gerrymandered probably 60-40, and the Republicans have run unopposed for a long time in this area, and I thought that was unfortunate. But more importantly, I think part of the problem for politics in general is it's all memes and 15-second sound bites. So for me, what I'm trying to do is actually spend an awful lot of time. I'm doing a bunch of videos and actually delving into and talking about the topics with people, getting into the multiple layers, because none of this is easy. You know, healthcare is not a 15-second issue in a meme.
Right. Okay, well, let's talk about healthcare, specifically the pandemic. We're okay in terms of last year's tax collections, the report just said, but everybody's worried about this year's tax collections. Sure. If we're $1 billion short, don't collect $1 billion, would you raise taxes or cut spending?
So I have to be honest, I kind of got to cheat because how many of these have you done now, Steve? How many?
You're number 46.
I'm number 46.
Yep.
Congratulations. I didn't watch them all, but I watched quite a few. And one of the things that struck me as kind of interesting when I listened to them is people kept, and your question specifically says, will you cut spending or raise taxes? And I think there's actually a third option. And part of that is debt. Not that we necessarily want to go there, but Wisconsin, 2015, $22 billion in debt, something along those lines. So the budget's already set, spending is already set to an extent. There's undoubtedly going to be some, because of COVID, because of loss of jobs, there's undoubtedly going to be some reduction in spending. That's just going to go along with it. Obviously, I think the numbers were close to $2 billion for the drop in revenue. So I think that we're going to have to potentially look at a little bit of both, but quite frankly, the debt, when you look at 2009, 10, 11, after the 2008 situation with revenue, our revenue again dropped dramatically then, and we had no choice. We actually, I think the debt per person went up to like $5,700 a person, resident in Wisconsin. It's now somewhere around $3,000, I want to say. So unfortunately, I think that's going to be part of the answer until we come out of this recovery, or back into the recovery. I think there's other things. The ACA, if the Wisconsin GOP had accepted it's about $200 million a year from the federal government for the ACA, so that subsidy, which they have not accepted for at least 7 years. So that's $1.4 billion that we've left on the table, and I think that's, quite frankly, that's a tragedy and a disservice to Wisconsin residents. And I'm going to throw this out. As much as Governor Walker and the Republicans, let me qualify. I'm not going to say Republicans. I'm going to say the state GOP, because I think there's a very big difference between the two. But their revenue, or the revenue for the state of Wisconsin, when you look at tax revenue from 2010 to 2018, increased by 34%. So did spending. So they had the opportunity to put us in a better situation, and they chose not to. So I find that also to be somewhat of a disservice. When I listened to Julian's, so Julian Bradley is my opponent, when I listened to his commentary on this, he talked about looking forward. And he's absolutely right. And of course, it's the Wisconsin motto. But legislature is the branch of the government that needs to look forward the most. Executive is dealing with what's going on right now. How do we, kick things in and make things happen as far as the laws that are passed? And the judicial, of course, is looking backwards. The legislature needs to look forward, and the GOP hasn't done that. And arguably, perhaps neither have the Democrats. But that's kind of my format is that we really need to actually plan ahead, look forward, consider some of the options, consider some of the things that are likely to happen in the future. And then we can deal with revenue much more accurately and appropriately.
The face mask has become an emotional issue. Some states, Senate Republicans, they'd like to come back to the Capitol and turn the governor's statewide face mask edict. Just curious, your position on face mask and the edict? Face
masks are really easy. Wear a damn face mask.
Okay. That's quick. Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes I can give quick answers. As far as the edict itself, here's what I found really, really interesting about when we go back to the Badger Bounce Back Plan, which the GOP got overturned with the state Supreme Court. The Badger Bounce Back Plan was an exact carbon copy duplicate of the White House plan for states. I think that's kind of fascinating that the GOP decided that because it was Evers implementing the White House plan that they were going to oppose it. So I think that's part of the problem is that, quite frankly, it was pure politics. The science is really easy. Wear a damn mask.
Okay. State Senator Cappingen last week introduced a bill that says if your organization or business complies with the COVID-19 protocols to protect patients, customers, employees, you couldn't be sued over COVID-19. Do we need that law?
Okay, so now we're getting into a really interesting aspect of law. Do we need that law? Well, we actually have stuff on the book for frivolous lawsuits. Frivolous lawsuits aren't supposed to happen. They're supposed to be thrown out by the judges. So the question becomes, are these actually potentially frivolous lawsuits? Am I for protecting people that do the right thing? Absolutely. We've already got laws in the books that do that. So do we need to do something specific for COVID? I don't know. And which edicts and which mandates are we talking about? Because we certainly know, and I'm here in District 28, from Franklin out to Muskego, Mukwonago, New Berlin, there's a lot of places that are not following the mask mandate. Well, okay, are we going to protect them because they chose not to? So I don't necessarily think it needs to happen as long as the judicial branch does its job appropriately with relationship to frivolous lawsuits. I absolutely don't want to see frivolous lawsuits, and we don't want to see them anywhere. But I don't necessarily know that we have to put something specific for COVID.
Hospitals on the front line, Wisconsin and nationally treating COVID-19. If you're a state senator voting on the next budget, do hospitals deserve an even greater priority than they may have in the current budget?
I think so to an extent. And it's... Listen, I'm a business owner. When you deal with the hospital numbers, the great challenge for them is they haven't been able to do the normal procedures that they would normally do that bring in a significant amount of revenue. Right. And so we absolutely want those hospitals in place. We obviously want them in place for dealing with COVID. Thankfully, it hasn't been as severe as we had perhaps anticipated, although the school reality here that we're jumping into I think will make things interesting. But they are the front line. They are what protect our entire society. So if we're not willing to support them, who are we willing to support?
As states around Wisconsin legalize medical and recreational marijuana, what's your position?
The math is easy. Do it.
Do it.
Both recreational and medicinal. Aside from it being an additional source of revenue, which obviously we're thinking that we're going to need, the ease and ability to cross the state line now into Illinois. I love what Illinois did with purging. Well, actually, they're in the process of purging. I think it's close to 700,000 convictions associated with small amounts of marijuana, and it's going to take them years. And that statistic in particular, and of course, Illinois is larger than we are, but that statistic in particular really caught my attention from a tragedy standpoint. They've got 700,000 small convictions that they're going to be, evacuating. What does Wisconsin have? Where we've now got people that have been They've got misdemeanors or felonies on their record. It's going to make it more difficult to get jobs. It just makes their life more difficult. So, and I actually did like a 6-minute video on this particular topic. The revenue is there, the safety is there. Let's make it, safer for our citizens rather than illegal. The addiction rate for it, for example, is significantly lower than things like alcohol and cigarettes. And one of the knocks against it, of course, is that it's a gateway drug. And the math on it, the science on it, the studies on it all show that it's not actually a gateway drug. Alcohol and nicotine are the two big gateway drugs. So it's less addictive than things that we already legally allow. It's obviously out there in a tremendous quantities. So we can make it safer. We can, quite frankly, make some revenue off of it and do what all the rest of the states around us are doing. Yeah, let's make life easy.
The Capitol on policing reforms is going in 3 different directions. The governor called a special session. He's got a 9-bill package. The speaker is going to form a task force. Republican Senator Van Wanggaard has his own ideas. What police reforms, if any, do you support?
What I've said repeatedly is law enforcement are the most lethally trained members of our society. And I don't think anybody would disagree with me on that. As such, I think that they should be held to the very highest standards. So I've seen things of, we need to do a better job of training the population. Well, there's only, the population is significantly larger than the number of police. So am I in favor of reviewing things? Absolutely, 100%. But that's not just police. So do we, Governor Evers, I think, barring chokeholds and some things along those lines, can we do that? Absolutely. Is that going to solve the problem, though, is more the question. Blacks in Wisconsin, and obviously, my district is 2% Black. So it's a minimal issue for this district. And unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, an issue that a lot of the people in this district find offensive themselves. The idea of defunding the police, which is a terrible term, and I won't use it. But the honest truth is that Black residents, Black citizens in Wisconsin are afraid of the police. They are afraid for their lives. And if we're not willing to accept that and acknowledge that, then we're never going to move forward. So one of the things that I would love to see is I would like to see officers actually go through a regular analysis, maybe annually, a couple every years, whatever, that's somehow associated with determining how jaded and biased they are, because that happens over time. The more terrible things you see, and arguably our law enforcement and our responders are those that see the most terrible things in our society. The more you see of that, the easier it becomes to believe that that's the way that society is. And so I think that part of the problem is as that jaded nature can grow, then that can infect and be a problem for an entire staff. Do I think it's a problem here in the 28th district? Absolutely not. Do I think it's a problem across the country in small areas? Absolutely. Would I like to see us be smarter and better about it? I absolutely think we can, because like I said, they are literally the most lethal people in our society.
Property taxes are high in Wisconsin and that's why school districts and local governments live for 20 years with caps and limits on property taxes. Yep. You're elected as a senator voting on the next state budget. Would you keep those caps and limits on property tax levies in place?
No, and I'm going to tie it into a couple of other things here. I know some of the other questions. Again, I kind of got to cheat a little bit because I saw so many of these. So what the GOP has proposed from the state level is they don't want to be involved, right? They don't want to tell communities what to do. They don't want to govern that way. And okay, that's a philosophy. The problem, though, is that by putting caps in place and by limiting, I think, one of the conversations is should local municipalities be able to put in their own sales tax, that sort of thing, for example. So what the GOP does is they say, no, you can't raise taxes. No, you can't raise property taxes. No, you can't put in a sales tax. But we are going to force you to be responsible for everything. But we're not going to give you any authority to do anything. So I think that's a huge, huge problem. I'll use the schools in the area. Again, I'm from Franklin all the way out to Muskego and New Berlin and Waterford. There are some very, very wealthy school districts in that area. And there are arguably going to be some poorer ones, Greenfield, Greendale, perhaps. None of them received any help, no guidance for anything associated with COVID that's just kicked in for the school districts this fall. So some are going full virtual, some are going full students returning, some are a mix, some are giving parents the options. But what's going to happen is some are going to succeed and some are going to fail. And the GOP is going to be able to say, see, that one that succeeded there, that's because we didn't do anything. We didn't step in and make them do anything. And then they get to look at the ones that fail and say, see, they didn't do their job well. Well, in both cases, what needed to happen, as far as I'm concerned, is the Department of Education, whether here at the state or at the federal level, should have stepped in and said, listen, we know that there are massive changes that you're going to have to put into place dealing with COVID, right? We could be talking ventilation systems. We could be talking computer systems. We're internet for students in order to be able to do remote. Whatever it might be, all districts, no matter where they're located and what they've decided to do, are going to have to spend a significant amount of revenue in order to make certain that everybody is safe, or as safe as possible. And that's what the state and federal level should have done, is said, listen, we're going to kick in 10%, 15%, whatever the number is, that you can choose to use in whatever way you and your citizens. So I don't have a problem with parents and school districts making the decisions as to whether they're going to stay open or go virtual, right? We can certainly understand that different areas have different requirements, but they all need additional revenue. And the GOP at the state level has said, nope, we're putting all the responsibility on you and giving you absolutely no authority to do anything.
So you would then support Representative Goyke's bill that would let Milwaukee County levy a half-cent sales tax after passage of referendum.
Absolutely.
Okay. The last year recommended raising the gas tax to stabilize highway and bridge funding. Your position?
Gas tax is a mess. I get the idea behind it, but here's the problem. First of all, let's deal with vehicles and the damage to the roads. So a lot of the vehicles that we've got now are becoming more efficient. And that's part of the challenge. We certainly have seen gas prices drop, $2 a gallon. And part of that is because there's significantly less demand. So there's an awful lot less driving. So gas tax isn't necessarily going to get us where we need to be. But as we deal with vehicles that are now hybrids or that are electric and significantly more efficient, that also reduces the revenue that comes into the state, regardless of the fact that there's not actually less traffic. Also, when you look at hybrids and, say, electrical cars, they're actually weigh about 10% more. So if you take a Tesla versus a comparable gasoline vehicle of the same size, the Tesla weighs 10% more. Well, that's more damage, that's more wear and tear on the roads, and uses no gas. So there's no tax associated there. So I think we actually need to look at eventually moving away from it, especially as vehicles become more electrified. What I think is the honest solution is similar to, like, Arizona, for example. Their vehicle registration is based on the value of the vehicle. I think we're going to have to go something like that. That's perhaps a scaled scenario, because the other problem with the gas tax is that it affects the poorest the most. And I know Democrats talk about that sort of thing a lot, but here's the simple math. The poorer you are, the older vehicle you are going to be able to afford, or a used vehicle or a less efficient vehicle, which means that you are going to be paying or spending more on gas and paying more on a gas tax. Whereas the wealthier you are, the more efficient a vehicle you're going to be able to drive, the new hybrids, the electrics, that you're not affected by. So that's the problem with the gas tax, is that it was applicable once upon a time. Our vehicles are changing. Tesla's looking at releasing electric semis. Well, we're screwed with the number of trucks that we've got here in Wisconsin if Tesla puts in a large electric plant or a large electric group of vehicles. So I think that we need to look at that aspect first of all, but then, trucks and stuff like that is another aspect. Obviously Wisconsin's huge. We've got a population of only 6 million across a very, very large space. So our highways are critically important. So honestly, I think a toll system is probably what makes the most sense. I love what Illinois has been able to do with making it, wireless. You just zip through. There's no longer slowing things down. That was obviously a huge problem with the tolls is backing up traffic. So I think that's a possibility. And then there was something else that I had as far as vehicles, and now I've lost it. But yeah, I think that there are other things that we're going to have to look at. Oh, here we go. I'm going to throw this out now that I remembered it. This will be great in the interview. Hopefully you can edit this out. I really think that the government, so in Wisconsin here in particular, needs to put something into place to help or to encourage the design or the creativity. And I'm sorry, I'm not saying this particularly well, but I think we need better materials is what it comes down to. I think that we need to put grants into place that allow us to create a material that's better for our roads and stands up longer than the concrete and the asphalt that we're dealing with. And you know what? We've got the University of Wisconsin system with some incredibly talented people there. So that's one of the other things where I think there's an investment that should be done. And let's come up with products that actually, say survive Wisconsin winters.
Okay. If a school district or a local government plans a major public works project, should they have to give a preference to Wisconsin businesses?
Sure. This was a question you and I were talking about a little bit, and there were some statistics that were put out in some of these. $72 million, I think, went out of state.
72 in 2015 to
right.
146
right.
in 2018.
And so 72 million and 146 million, that sounds like a lot of money. The question is it a lot of money, first of all? So I don't know what those numbers represent. I don't know if that's 5% or if that's 50%. So if you look at it from a pure business standpoint and we say, okay, we want the least expensive options, and I'm not necessarily a fan of that by any stretch of the imagination, but if we want the least expensive options and out of state is the least expensive, then that's the way that we should go. And that's a tax revenue, a taxpayer way of looking at things. However, that 72 million or 146 million in 2018, if it had gone to Wisconsin businesses, then it stays in and it increases our tax revenue and it increases jobs and stuff like that. So there's there's a split. There's two different aspects of things. We can't, I don't think, easily say yes or no. So that's why I'm curious as to what that number is. Does it represent, for example, $72 million worth of business that was done with out-of-state organizations because we don't have anybody in Wisconsin that does that job? Well, then we need to bring those people in from out of state. Is it something that we put into place, say, 80-20? Let's establish a percentage that, all right, we recognize we need services from other places. We certainly want to be able to provide our contractors to other states as well. And so do we say, listen, it's got to be 80-20 Wisconsin out of state because we know that some are going to have to come from out of state. So I think there's a lot of questions associated with that. And those two numbers don't mean anything without a tremendous amount of context.
Fair enough. Almost out of time. Contrast you with your opponent on November 3. Differences?
Sure. Julian's got a really awesome story. He's opposed to abortion. Terrific. Neither he nor I will ever have any idea or experience the fear, terror, or excitement that a woman will have when she finds out she's pregnant. That has become Julian's entire platform. And he hasn't changed that since he was 21 years old. I'm a chess player. I'm a poker player. I own a software company. I look at things from multiple different perspectives. I delve layers and layers deep. Julian does not, and he never has. If you look at his platform on his website, it is the exact same thing that every GOP candidate in Wisconsin says. He is 100% pro-guns. Listen, we've had more guns sold in the United States in the last 10 years than we did in the last 100 years. nobody's taking away your guns. He is 100% pro-life. Well, I am 100% pro people's rights. And I think that comes ahead of things. And I could go on and on about the very basic things that he's put on there, but there's no creativity. And more importantly, there's no answers. The GOP and Julian Bradley have not offered any ideas or any suggestions for at least the last 10 years. And quite frankly, that's horseshit.
Fair enough. Adam Murphy of Franklin is a Democratic candidate in the 28th Senate District. The election is November 3. Adam, thanks for talking to WisconsinEye.
Steve, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.